We are live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and the time is 6 p.m. Joining me tonight are board members Chair Diana Carpio and Secretary Kara Nelson-Bakey. Also with us tonight is the admin team, NPS CFO Linda Asmani and Budget Director Kristen Carson. First, I will entertain a motion to approve the March 13th, 2025 minutes.
Motion.
Seconded.
Thank you, ladies. That motion has been passed. If there are any public comments, if there are any email comments that we've received, they will be included into the record. I will turn it over to Mr. Asmani for review and possible action of the FY25 budget review. You are on.
Thank you. I think we're going to start with transfers.
I'm sorry.
Kristen,
Yes,
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Kristen will walk us through. We only have 2 transfers today for you.
Did you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
The 2 transfers, easy breezy. It just is really an adjustment related to electricity, just moving it from the schools that have less of a trend rate to where we're trending higher for 76,000.
Pretty simple. So that just means that one school had more expense in that regard than the other, and you're just moving it over.
Right. So Ponus and Cranberry were running less than trends than budgeted, and Brian McMahon and Roe Inn were running a little higher than what we had budgeted.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I mean, I don't know if this is the audience to respond to this. That would probably be facilities, but do we have any thoughts on why Ponus and Cranberry are running low on electricity?
No, but we can find out and get back to you
We
on
can
that.
find out.
I mean,
Typically, it'll be
those are kind
programming
of big
because they have.
It could be that programming, or it could be, you know, the assumptions that were used when the budget was struck the year before.
Okay. I mean, I'm just curious.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it could be also because we're using less electricity now than we did, especially when we were during COVID.
Well, no, we would have been using less during COVID.
No, I think we
We're
would be
open.
using more because of all the special equipment we needed now, like the doubling up on air filters and things like that. Like right now, I think we would be using less than before.
Okay.
Because even
And
though
I guess I was thinking of like when kids were like hybrid and, you know,
but we still had
partially
staff
remote.
and some people in the schools, so we had to have all those extras.
Right. But then on the flip side, it's like, why is BMS and Rowayton, why are they up?
I mean, it could be what Lunda said, where they're just running additional programs there, or the lights are on.
Additional program, weekend games, tournaments on the weekends where they have the lights on longer. So that would be a factor as well. Or after school activities, like for example, at Brian McMahon, we've had a couple of some of our, history festivals that we've had. And so
Right.
we've hosted a lot
hours.
more events after
And
hours.
extra
events.
meetings at night too there.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, that makes sense to me on the high school side. But I'm just curious.
Right. And then on the lower side, these are estimates. It could be that the estimates that we went in at the beginning of the year were slightly off. And so we're just now right sizing for where
Got
the
it.
expenses actually occur.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion on the table to move the budget transfers?
Motion.
Seconded.
Motion by Ms. Bakey and second by Ms. Carpio. That motion has passed. Next will be Mr. Asmani, who will give us a report on the FY25 budget review.
Thank you. So you have the detailed line items. I'll just walk through the items, beginning with the general fund. As you can see, percent of budget spent in total, we're at 70.9%. This is for the month of March, which would be third quarter. So from a budget tracking, we're 75% into the year, and we spent about 71% of the budget. So this is consistent with where we would be this time of year. Salaries continue to be the largest drivers. We spent about 68% of our salaries, 75% into the year. As you know, with our summer pay, we do the balloon payments in the summer, so this will catch up towards the end of the year to kind of align with where we are with the budget. Benefits, they are below where we were last year. Again, this is just a function. We budgeted fewer benefits this year because we had savings in the health insurance account. So again, that is consistent. Professional and technical services is at 72% of budget spent. Year over year, we're a little over 20% of where we were last year. But again, this is a function of timing of payments. There are a number of contracts that we pay professional services that we front load at the beginning of the year. And then as we go throughout the year, we begin to right size, for lack of a better word. And the same is true for property services. The other student services, this is where we pay out of district tuition, and this is one where we've been having conversations. So you'll notice that we're 75% into the year, but we've already spent 85.7% of the budget. And that is kind of consistent with what we have been sharing with you in terms of additional special education costs as they're trending. We are year over year, we're about 8.3% higher in spending this time last year. And again, that is consistent. It's less about the number of students, but it is more a function of the cost per student that we're paying to outsource providers. So we've been doing transfers throughout the year. In the transfers you approved today, we did not include any transfers for SPED. We did do a couple at the beginning of the year. You recall that this year, I think it was last month, when the state approved the $40 million additional funding for excess cost, we anticipate receiving just under $900,000 of special education funding by way of excess cost. And so what happens with that funding, we pay some of our personnel expenses via the excess cost. So we will be able to transfer some of these projected expenses that we're seeing now from the local budget to that additional excess cost. So we have about an additional $900,000 available to spend, which I think will go a long way towards allowing us to end the year where we would anticipate to be. And I've shared in the past, if for some reason we're not able to get to that number, we have already shared this with the city that we would be coming for a possible special appropriation, which is not uncommon. A lot of districts have actually been doing that already, but we're monitoring this one. And then the supplies, equipment, and other objects, these are smaller in numbers, but they're also trending where we would anticipate them to be. So if there aren't any questions on the year-to-date general fund, I'll briefly talk over the grant fund and then the food services fund, and then just give you an update on where we are on budget development.
So we're basically about 5 million over, right? This year as opposed to last year, year-to-date actual, right? About 5 million, right? Is that right?
Those were our initial projections. We revised those projections. Right now, we're closer to 2.2, 2.3.
Okay.
When we did the last one, because I think the last update I gave you was in February. We did another projection at the end of March just to kind of see where we are. So we've brought it down to like 2.3. But again, we're monitoring the grant side, and so we'll make some additional adjustments.
You know, I was looking at the actual year-to-date. Year-to-date is about 5 over.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I see.
year-to-date is about 5 over, yeah. And that would really just probably partially would be just from contractual things too, right? You know,
correct.
Percentage increases and contracts and things of that nature.
Yes. So year over year, the total number variance is the 3%. Yeah, we're about $5 million over, 3% more than when we were last year. And our budget this year is 3% from last year. So that's kind of consistent with where we would anticipate to be.
Yeah. So you said you
Uh,
were going to do the food fund next?
Yes, so the next is the grant fund. Similar scenario. On the grant fund, we're actually faring better. With grants, we don't really have the danger of going over because we just spend what we receive.
Right.
The only thing that impacts this is sometimes just delay in reimbursement. We spend upfront and then we submit for reimbursement, but there's never really ever a danger of going over on the grants. As you may have seen the article in the paper, we did have some ARPA ESSER funds that the
Right.
state called back. I believe it was $6 million statewide.
Yes.
Our portion was about 60,000. We had actually had plans to spend that money. We're still waiting for guidance. We still think that we may still be able to spend that. Some of it was just supply chains, and that's why we haven't spent it so far. But we did have a purchase order open, and we have items that we're planning to spend it on. So depending on what happens with that grant, if those funds don't come through, then we just wouldn't buy those supplies and materials. But we're hoping that we still would be able to procure those before the year is over.
When's the deadline? Because I thought there was a deadline that they were going to snatch them back. So,
Well, the deadline is not very,
clear, right?
it's not clear
Yeah.
because the initial deadline, the extension was March 28th of 2026.
That's what I thought, right?
And then they decided on March 20th, 2025, nope, this is it. We're pushing it up a year. But there's still some back and forth because the state, not just us, but other states haven't
Right.
also received guidance on this.
Right.
As you know, there's a lot of, I'm doing this today, then tomorrow it gets overturned. And so we're still monitoring. But for us, our total ESSER dollars were in the 40s millions. And so, to just have 60,000 clawed back from all of the ESSER funding, we're
Right.
actually in a
Not
much better
terrible.
place than some of the
Right.
communities. I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember the name of the town. There was one town that I read in today's The Hour. They have $2 million clawed
Waterbury.
back in this.
Wow.
It was Waterbury, yes.
Yeah, Waterbury and
Waterbury
New
had $2
Haven
million.
got hit very hard.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they probably really need it.
Yeah. So, and then the last one is the food services fund. Again, this one is where we anticipate to be. We're pretty much flat in terms of year-over-year variance spend. We're at 4.5 million this year, and we were at 4.5 million last year. So are there any questions on the year-to-date for these three funds?
Now, even again with the food services fund, wasn't there some discussions that the feds were going to make some
That
moves
too.
on that as well? So would that, if that happens, would that be now or would that be next year potentially?
We've been told that we're safe for this year. This is again one of those accounts where we spend first and then get reimbursed after. For this one, I believe last year our final installment actually came during the fiscal year, but in prior years we typically get that final installment in July, sometimes as late as August. And so the danger in this is that we spend this money up front.
And you
And so
don't, and you
not
don't get
getting
the
the money would be the
Right.
reimbursement. Yeah. So
Right,
that
you
would be
wouldn't
the
get
danger.
reimbursement. That was my
Wouldn't get the
next question.
reimbursement.
You spend the money, you don't get reimbursed.
Right. So far, they've shared with us that the school lunch program, because it's through the USDA Department of Agriculture rather than the Department of Education.
Right.
This one, for now, it's considered one of the safer ones of the
Okay.
grants that we receive, but
That's good to know.
nothing is safe. So
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before we move on to the FY26 budget development update?
You good?
No,
Mr.
okay, so I'll start with last night, the last night the capital budget was approved by the council. So we had initially, and the superintendent's recommended and the board approved was 7.4 million. Mayor's recommendation was 6.9, so we had to shave off about $500,000 from our original request. But last night they did approve the 6.9 million, and so we're just waiting on these accounts to be created so we can move forward with some of these projects. Many of these are summer projects, and therefore we anticipate getting very busy a very busy summer capital program. But we are happy that the 6.9 stayed from what the mayor had recommended. You recall there was some earlier conversation about shaving off the capital budget. So fortunately that did not happen. And then the next slide, just to close, just to give you an update on where we are with the operating budget. So I'll just kind of walk through the numbers in the blue column. So our current year budget is the $233.3 million. The BOE tentatively approved the budget of 255.9, which has that 9.7%. You recall that when you approved that budget, we had another $1 million or so in reductions that we were to make. So our total budget adjusted was about 256.1 million. The mayor and the BT and the Common Council approved 242 million, which is 4%. So the gap that we needed to reduce was 13.4 to get from the 9.7 to the 4%. I reported to you last month, we went through the SBB process. Through the SBB process, we were able to reduce about $12 million through a combination of positions, of supplies and equipment and materials, but we got to that 12-point mark. But then we also received information, updated figures for health insurance. We had budgeted initially estimated a 10% increase. The state plan came in at 11%. The teacher's plan, which is a larger plan, came in at 15%. This is the second year that it's come in at 15%. On the state plan, we have about 500 covered individuals. On the Cigna plan, which is a teacher plan, that's a bigger group, we have about 1,000 members there. So that the 15% increase hits us almost twice because it's bigger than the 10, but it's also double the number of insured from the state plan. So once we factored that in, we needed to add another $2.1 million to the budget, which now brings the number to $246.2 million. We had initially in our presentations to you, we had anticipated using some of the carryover funds of about $2.5 million, but we are going to be needing to use that this year just to address special education. So that $2.5 million will not be available to address the FY26. So I have to make that adjustments in the budget to not be able to draw that down because that money won't be available to be drawn. And then we're also adjusting for turnover. We're seeing this year we don't have the vacancy rates we've had in the past. The individuals we're bringing on, they're not coming in at the lower salaries that we've typically brought them on before just because of experience. We changed our union contract to now accept private school experience, and therefore we're not seeing the turnover. So we're adjusting the turnover estimates and adding another $500,000, taking away $500,000 in projected savings. So that puts our need right now without any additional adjustments at $249 million. So right now we're about $6.5 million short of the 4% target of 232. So as you heard you've heard from the mayor during the BT meeting, you've heard from the superintendent. There are conversations where for 2 years now, the mayor has provided some supplemental funding to the district. So we think we're working with them to address this gap. We're also monitoring some grants at the state level. We're waiting for the governor the General Assembly to approve their budget request, which will be, we're hoping it'll be close to what the governor has initially proposed. So there may be some additional funding there. I was in a meeting last week where the lieutenant governor was a featured speaker, and she indicated that there is they're feeling hopeful that the General Assembly will address some of our needs on the education side, particularly special education. So we're watching that closely. We will know where the state budget falls sometime after spring break. So we're hoping that after spring break, we will have some clearer numbers and we will know what the actual gap is. But for now, we're at $6.5 million, but we are hopeful we'll be able to bring it down. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Boy. So we don't know at this point, maybe you mentioned and I missed it because it broke out a little bit, about whether or not the city will do something similar to what they did last year. Or we just don't know that yet, right?
We don't know that yet. The mayor and the superintendent are in conversations. We haven't received a commitment. I know last year, for example, the mayor shared what they would do at the May BT meeting when they were setting the cap, which would be May 5th. So we're hopeful if the same calendar holds this year, by May 5th or 6th, we may possibly have an answer from the mayor and his team in terms of what they can do.
And then also you've got, those are the year-to-date school-based budget reductions. So it's expected that there'll be more, correct? Because they're still working on that.
Correct. And we shared with the principals and assistant principals this week that we're not there. And so it's not just on the school side, but we are going to be looking at the central office as well in terms of how can we collaboratively together get to this target. So it's not going to solely depend on the schools. We are going to be looking at non-school budgets as well to balance.
So what is your time frame? Like, when do we need to have a more firm number? I mean, I know you talked about after spring break to find out what the General Assembly will do, but what is your sense of, timing? When would you like to see all of the numbers in from the schools and central office, for that matter, reduction?
I would say mid-May, because we bring at your May workshop is when we will present our final reconciliation. And so at that point, we would have known everything that we still don't know. And then I believe at your June business meeting is when you approve the final budget. So the next 4 or 5 weeks is the time frame when we expect to have a lot of these answers resolved, both at the state level and from the city.
But you talked about more reductions from central office. Weren't there already some reductions and modifications made in central office?
There were some. I believe initially we made almost $3 million worth in reduction by number of positions, but just because we're still short of the target, we will be forced to go back to both central office and the schools. So we're working with with the central office team. We're also working with the schools team as well to see what needs to happen.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
How will the conversations go with the unions? Because this is going to affect a lot of staff, and as cuts happen, that means people will have to take on more responsibility.
Correct. So we actually started last week with conversations. The unions that are going to be most impacted is the administrators union, the teachers union, and the NFEP, our educators union. And so we've started conversations with both. We're actually currently looking at, first we begin by looking at seniority list, because there is bumping, and seeing what the seniority looks like, just to get common agreement. We're also reviewing, this is usually the time of year when we get notices of retirements or resignations at the end of the school year. We're also looking at what are some of the vacant positions that we have currently, and therefore what we would do around this time is not fill any of the vacant positions and kind of see if some of the current employees would bump into those vacant positions before we go outside to recruit. So that's kind of what's happening now. So those conversations have already begun. And we've already started sharing seniority lists and those types of things, and addressing any initial discrepancies, if any, that we need to address. But those conversations have started.
Thank you.
And based on the school-based budgets that we've seen so far, are there any concerns about us losing classrooms and impacting student populations within individual classrooms?
So we've looked at that. We've looked at some of the demographic information that projections from last year. So there are some schools where we have reduced the number of sections. So, for example, there are a number of schools that have gone from 3 sections to 2 sections per grade. Some have gone from 4 to 3 sections per grade, just depending on the enrollment. And so with that, that also impact the teaching within that school. We're also looking at the high schools, because high schools are unique because they offer a variety of programming. Some of their classes by design are smaller, the electives, for example. So one of the things we're also looking is the frequency of electives, rather than offering a particular class twice a year. Maybe you kind of follow the college model. Maybe you offer it once a year in the spring. And so if a student over a 4-year period or a 3-year period in high school has an opportunity to take it, not if they can't take it this year, they can plan their schedule and take it the following year. But that's also some of the things we're looking at as well, in terms of how can we just adjust our program. It reduces choice in terms of when you can take a class, but our goal, obviously, we have requirements that they must meet for graduation. So now we're looking at a broader picture that if you can take it over the 2-year period, then we'll go for that.
That's pretty tough on the students too, because like you said, they don't have choice, and
Right.
the stress level
Correct.
of, am I going to get into that class, especially if it's your senior year? It's hard.
Well, correct. And there are more people getting into the class now, right? Because you've consolidated it from
Right.
2 offerings a year to 1.
Mhm.
So it is a bigger class, a bit more competition to get into that class as well.
But the classes are also bigger in students, but we are following the rules. in the state.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yes, we are staying within the guidelines of the contracts, teachers' contracts.
You're on mute, Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Osmani and Ms. Carsmith, for this very thorough presentation. Appreciate it. And also appreciate the fact that you guys are continuing to try to, find creative ways to make adjustments without really impacting the classroom as much as you can. Seems like that's
Yes,
going to be
we are. So
impossible, though. Go ahead.
No, you're right. Sorry to interrupt. Yes, it is challenging. It is.
Yes, it is.
I do want to thank the finance team, Kristen and staff, and also just the collaboration we've had with the school principals. We've had some really challenging conversations, but we all understand the task ahead, that it's not easy, but it does make the work less challenging when you have people that you can collaborate and work together with. So I do want to give a shout out to all of our school leaders as well, because this is not easy on them either.
And it sounds like it continues to be a challenge
Mhm.
because we're not there yet.
Correct. No,
Anyway.
we're not.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion
Thank
by Ms.
you.
Wright, second by Ms. Carpio. The meeting is adjourned at 6. My clock on my car is wrong. I'm showing 6:26, but I feel like that's not the right time, right? Can somebody tell me what the correct time is?
29.
6:29. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
And have a
you.
Everybody.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.